I'd like to take you through a very quick overview of the Drink Up campaign, what it looked like in the United States, and the tactics that we used to change the landscape. This project was a proof of concept constructed to convince government and public health practitioners of the cost-benefit value of using market research to determine who to target and where to target at levels that were as precise as the postal code. So it was very granular in its ability to understand the marketplace and consumer desires. And the evaluation of the campaign was done by a controlled study that compared the purchase patterns of those exposed to the campaign message versus those who were not exposed. We approached this campaign by asking, how can we apply the techniques of powerful advertising to create healthier behaviors? Without a very large budget, what could we do to approximate some of those techniques to create messages that would resonate and then place the message in a place where many people would see it? And it was important to quantify our success so we could recruit more participants to the campaign in the 4 years that the campaign would run. We used the celebrity of Mrs. Obama to gather the support of multiple influencers and organizations. The campaign was officially conducted by the Partnership for a Healthier America, a non-governmental group that was chaired by Mrs. Obama. It was important to gather as much political will and leadership to have them put their credibility and reputation into leading and sponsoring the campaign. The Drink Up campaign launched in the last quarter of 2013 and ran for 4 years. This is a visual summary of what the campaign looked like after just the first year.
The First Lady raises her glass to toast water.
Michelle Obama held her own pep rally for H2O inside the Watertown High School gym, trying to encourage students to drink even 1 glass of water a day.
When you drink water, you drink up! We've got a very special message from First Lady Michelle Obama.
Today, I'm working to inspire Americans of all ages to drink more water.
Drink up, I've always said that, and now I'm applying it to water.
1 more glass of water a day? But then I'd be drinking 1 glass of water a day.
First Lady says drink up, I'm gonna drink.
That's right.
Drink up, everybody.
Drink up, cheers.
Thank you, Mrs. Obama.
When you drink water, you drink up.
You drink up.
Bebe con ganas.
Making an easy choice is as easy as a drink of water.
Drink water, water, drink water, water, water.
You are what you drink. And when you drink water, you are at your best.
Drink up.
Drink up. Drink up.
Drink up.
Drink Up aimed at a general audience, but we concentrated on the parts of the population in America who were drinking large amounts of sugar. What you're looking at in this slide is a segmentation of the American population in 2015. As you probably know, segmentation is the process of dividing a market of potential customers into groups based on different characteristics. These segments are then used to determine how consumers will respond to marketing strategies. The segmentation here identified the psychographic attitudes toward health. We know from research that people's behaviors are a direct result of the attitudes they have, especially toward their health. We've seen this during the pandemic. People with similar attitudes will behave similarly. Understanding their attitudes, the media they consume, where they live and shop is critical to reaching them with both the message of any campaign and its product or category of products. We strategically focused on 3 of the 5 segments that you saw in the previous slide. And then we superimposed observed behavioral data, purchase behaviors, media behaviors, and geographic location on top of what we knew about their attitudes. The fence sitters, about 19% of the population at the time, were the primary target, because research showed that with a bit more information, their habits are easiest to change. They want to be healthy, but are often young parents with busy lives and cannot be healthy. The well-beings, 17% of the population, are already healthy, but are the trendsetters for all other groups. The Eat, Drink, and Be Merries were 22% of the population and are the hardest to change because they mostly care about taste, convenience, and affordability. But they were important to target from a public health point of view because they're the most at risk. In the US, with tremendous ethnic diversity, it was useful to compare the segmentation of a target population to the general population. For instance, the largely Hispanic East Los Angeles market is comprised primarily of fence sitters, 40%, and well-beings, 21%. Together, they are 61% of the East Los Angeles population. Each geography has a different proportion of these attitudinal segments, and knowing that segmentation provided us an ability to be efficient in making sure the message was reaching those who needed it the most. The most important tactic in this campaign was the use of neurotesting. Neurotesting of the verbal and visual messages of the campaign was used to inform all of the language that each of the multiple stakeholder participants of the campaign would use. And they used it in a disciplined way so that the audience of the campaign would not be confused as to what action should be taken on the message: drink more water. This tactic of neurotesting is routinely performed by industry around the world. Messaging that is created is rarely, if ever, negative. The most important, biggest takeaway is that sophisticated marketers know that negative messaging rarely works. Effective messages should be specific and actionable, but not overwhelming. For instance, eat less and exercise more is not specific, and drink 8 glasses of water a day may not be achievable, but drink just 1 more glass of water than you're drinking is. Negative or loss-framed messages cause the listener to detach. And once we detach, it becomes difficult to internalize a message. Our campaign messages were tested with imagery that would later be used to trigger the remembrance of the message at the point of purchase. Before launching the Drink Up campaign, we tested the language, including the taglines of the campaign. We tested visual images of the campaign for their ability to move the audience to action when they got inside the store or at the point of purchase. Consumers make 60 to 70% of their decisions at the point of purchase, and packages in stores are designed to trigger the memory of advertising that has been seen in advance. The language and images of the campaign were then used according to the brand guidelines. Those guidelines discipline the way the images of the campaign are used, including how they're imprinted on water bottles by the bottled water companies who participated in the campaign. In testing the language of the campaign, we also knew that men and women hear messaging differently and react differently to visuals. So the testing must work well for both. For the launch of the campaign, we produced this video, which appeared on children's television as a commercial. This is an example of entirely neuro-tested language meant to resonate with the unconscious desire for water.
Your body contains up to 70% water. It's what you run on. So when you feel like you're running low, have a glass. Woo! And recharge your body. You're gonna drink something, and what you drink is up to you. When you drink water, you drink up.
Now, this campaign had a unified group of stakeholders, and it requires multiple stakeholders and sectors in a society's culture to create new norms. Because it was aligned with the commercial interests of the beverage companies, the Drink Up campaign had the support of the bottled water producers. In addition to the bottled water companies, though, this campaign had the participation of multiple federal government agencies, philanthropic organizations, national and local politicians, influential sports figures, popular musicians, actors, clothing designers, the political culture generally, as well as local cultural influencers such as churches. The campaign brand guidelines achieved a consistent message from all participants in the campaign. Effective communication requires many characteristics, but chief is that the message be consistent. Regulation is an essential part of reining in the excesses of advertising and marketing to children, but regulators are at a disadvantage. We need popular culture to make a lasting impact. Why is that? Well, increasingly, the influences that create norms for the consumption of foods are embedded inside the programming and in other media that is not as transparent to adults or regulators, but is helping to form habits. While regulators are focused on advertising, it might be important to focus on the advertising that appears between the commercials. Advertisements that we recognize as advertising and advertising that is embedded in the creative narrative of movies, television shows, and video games are received differently in a neurological sense by the viewing public. Often that which we are not perceiving as advertising, but has many commercial messages embedded nevertheless, is more influential than traditional advertisement. We learn from popular culture and media what is cool and trendy and acceptable. And if that doesn't convince you, consider the fact that increasingly people are not watching traditional advertisements at all because streaming around the world is rapidly becoming more and more common. In fact, there are entire businesses in Hollywood and around the world that do nothing but seek to embed products with influencers in programming narratives. In addition, marketing research tells us that word of mouth is more effective than any other kind of advertising, which is in part why influencers on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube are more influential than ever. Aligned stakeholders must begin to find a place to disintermediate the conversation with a unified message of their own. A groundbreaking study in the American Journal of Pediatrics last year on the role of social media influencers suggested that child influencers build brand awareness, Susceptibility to advertising may be exacerbated by influencers because their brand posts are subtly interspersed with their unbranded posts, making it more difficult for children or their caregivers to discern persuasive intent. In addition, the researchers cite social norm theory, which suggests that parents may see a video with millions of views and thousands of likes, indicating that it is socially acceptable to allow children to watch. Brand producers are very sophisticated in understanding the psychology of creating product logos on the packaging, the advertising, and the placement within programming and social media. Now, Boyd Swinburne, lead author of this article in The Lancet, is a collaborator on the STOP project and well known to many of you, I'm sure. This study urges a greater cohesion of civil society to counter the political pressure of commercial interests. But a bigger question is, how do we create a climate where citizens value health, a climate that gives civil society the opportunity to have public support for policy change? We need a society that expects policymakers to resist the commercial interests and prioritize public health. New norms are very effectively created through popular culture. And the market research that so effectively pairs with popular culture has an ability to help policymakers become more efficient and more effective in their own messaging. It requires multiple stakeholders in a society's culture to really impact new norms. And as I've said before, the Drink Up campaign had many stakeholders, including the commercial interests. But it's not realistic to think that many commercial interests will cooperate often, if ever, against their monetary interests on behalf of the public health. But even without the cooperation of commercial participants, those who are interested in the public's health and well-being would fare better if they would begin to understand some of these sophisticated techniques and deploy them in a more unified way, so that at the very least, the public could hear a unified message from its public servants who they count on to act in their best interest. During the time of the Drink Up campaign, we discovered that Gatorade, a product produced by PepsiCo and sold as a sports recovery drink, had created a downloadable video game for children to play on their phones. This game featured celebrity athlete Usain Bolt, the fastest man on earth. In the game, the athlete was fueled by the sports drink, but if he encountered water, it slowed his performance and reduced his ability to reach the goal. And that was in 2013, but things have progressed since then. These messages are everywhere, and many of them are not transparent to adults. So what might it look like if public health were effectively inserting messages into popular culture? Here's an example, perhaps not even a very strong example, of a way in which a message about food behavior might be introduced inside the narrative. This is a clip from the globally distributed film Soul. This film, advertised as a family movie, was distributed straight to streaming at the beginning of the pandemic. In this scene, one of the accountants from heaven has come down to reclaim the soul of the lead character who has died, but then, against the rules of heaven, returned to earth. The accountant mistakenly reclaims the wrong soul from the wrong body and then returns.
Come to Terry.
Gotcha! Thought you could cheat the universe. Well, you thought wrong. I'm the accountant, and I'm here to bring you a... Oh, you're not
Joe Gardner. My mistake. We'll just get you back into your meat suit. There you go. No harm, no foul. Oh, boy. Look, fella, I'm thinking there's no reason we can't keep this little incident between us, eh? Mistakes happen, and it's not your time. Unless you keep eating those processed foods, am I right? Seriously, stay away from those processed foods.
Now, here's an example of a commercial company that found it in its best interest to promote a positive message. There are celebrities, writers, role models for children who are willing to work with advertisers of healthier products and athletes who are conscious of the ethical choices they are making when they agree to represent a product. This athlete, the popular American athlete Steph Curry, who had an opportunity to sign up with a major sweetened beverage manufacturer, instead went with Brita, the water filter company. He played an early part in the Drink Up coalition that came together to promote a healthier choice.
You might think all water is the same, but some water can dribble, rain threes, even drain a buzzer beater. We're all made of water, so make every drop amazing with Brita.
You are what you drink.
Drink cleaner, healthier, amazing with Brita.
Finally, regulators will never be able to keep pace with the ways in which commercial providers try to sell us stuff. Policymakers must have a counter narrative that is centered on consumer understanding. It must be memorable, specific, actionable, and most importantly, achievable. The delivery of the message should be disciplined by the language that has been tested for the public's ability to understand what you are saying in a way that drives their innate desire to be the very best person, the very healthiest person they can be, so that they can live their best lives for as long as they can. Remember, consumer-centric, research-based, memorable, specific, actionable, and achievable. Thank you.
I found that presentation absolutely fascinating, Karen. And I think your bottom line that policymakers, a lot of us are here on the conference call, will never be able to keep up with the commercial interests. And I think that's obviously very, very clear. I suppose some of the things we can do, as you said, well, you mentioned them all there at the end, just in the more general context for policymakers at government level. I suppose the key thing is that we need to employ commercial tactics, like, you know, as you mentioned, the social marketing, that we certainly need to be on the same platforms as the children that we're trying to reach are, and that we need to use a suite of measures. We're looking in Ireland, we're just about to lead out on an adult weight campaign. We already have one called Start on children. And in that we have employed behaviour technique measures using the COM-B measure. And I think focusing on research theories like that have sound backing are very important if we want to be effective. I suppose the thing that we haven't really identified so much at the moment is product placement. We are working on that, and we have included that in our codes of practice, but in fact our codes of practice haven't really been implemented yet because the food industry are maintaining that they require guidance specifically on in order to deliver on the codes of practice. So that is one of the things that we're working on in Work Package 6, which Maria Joa will tell you about tomorrow, because we're looking at experiences on developing the codes and then on how we're going to monitor the codes and whether they'll be voluntary initially or will be regulatory. But the problem is, if they're regulatory, you said we're going to miss out a number of opportunities to keep an eye specifically on that too. I suppose the influencers, as you mentioned, have a key role. We know that in 2019 here in Ireland, there was an influencer who was paid €25,000 for 10 product placements in her YouTube videos. So that is an area we really have to address. And as you were saying, a lot of adults and parents of children and carers don't actually even realize that there are advertisements going in. So it really is a huge uphill climb for us to keep up. And obviously we have to test the language and I like you're saying, be the very best person and the healthiest person that you can be. We are now focusing on best weight, and that has come from work that's been done in Canada, where they've defined your best weight to be the weight that you can maintain, that you feel healthiest and happiest at. So I think that's really interesting. And the final comment I'd just like to make is that really, I suppose one example of how social marketing, media, television, whatever, can have an impact is that, as you probably most of you know, last year at the pre-match press conference ahead of the Euro 2020 football matches, Ronaldo was doing a pre-match interview, and Coca-Cola were actually one of the sponsors of Euro 2020, but there were 2 bottles of Coca-Cola in front of him, and he moved those away and put his bottle of water and said agua down instead. And that actually wiped billions off the Coca-Cola share market, and probably has done more in relation to sugar sweetened drinks than we've all managed to do together. But I think we have to be optimistic. As you said, we have to be positive. We have to keep trying to come out with positive messages. We have to certainly test them for their effectiveness and their efficiency. And really what we have to do is all join together, because individual governments can't really do this on their own, or individual member states. We need to all come together to form a coalition to be able to move ahead on this. And you'll hear more about that tomorrow with Work Package 6 with Maria Joao from Portugal. Thank you very much, Moicha. And Franco. Thank you, Franco.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ursula. And we're very glad that you managed to overcome your technical difficulties and contribute to the discussion. I think there is an issue that has really come up very strongly in this session, that is, the difficulty that governments have in keeping up with developments, particularly in advertising, so that there is a risk. Well, it's a reality more than a risk. That governments are really outgunned in money terms and also outpaced in terms of the developments that are happening, particularly in the digital sector, and the ability of private companies and corporations to deploy techniques and approaches that are really escaping any form of regulation by governments. This is a real issue, and we cannot continue to live with that. We really need innovative approaches to government regulation that will enable governments to keep under control these developments. That is really, a game changer potentially if governments are able to develop new approaches of this kind. But we need to work very hard on that, of course. Draw this session to a close. Thank you very much, Karen and Ursula. It's been a very, very interesting session.